tomb, the empty tomb, and now after the tomb. And the church started. We're now to the point where after the tomb, now what? Now we're in that same chunk, after the tomb. And the beginning of the church. And I think it's important to see, what did they do? How did they organize it? What was important to the first church when they were following Jesus being here in person? And today I want to talk about this idea of gathering. Why do we gather? We, a while ago, just quit talking about it as a service because, and I understand it's a great term, but I always felt like, who's serving what at our service, right? And we should be serving each other, but really it's a gathering. We're gathering together. But why do we gather? And there are a lot of reasons, I think, why we gather on Sunday morning for church. And maybe evaluating that, I think number one often is potato salad, frankly. I think for a lot of us, right. Yes, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons we get together. Sometimes I think for a lot of us, at times it's just habit. It's what we do on a Sunday morning. And not that it's bad, that's great. Sometimes that's all we need. Sometimes we just need to have a good habit that does it. Sometimes it's because we want to know who are the good people and the bad people, right? I'm a good person because I'm here. Someone else is at Walmart this morning, they're a bad person, right? I had one time, I was applying for a job at a church, and for a long time I had been going to a church that had 5 services, and we went on a Saturday night service, and we loved the Saturday night service because, besides it was a great community, and we loved people, and they had just a good group of folks, but also there was a whole Sunday, like a whole day, where we could kind of do what we wanted. And I was applying for another job, and they were very concerned that I was going to church on Saturday night. Because it just really bothered them. And there was a lot of questions like, do you think that's okay for people to go to church on Saturday night? And I wasn't sure if they were kind of joking or not. I realized, no, this was an important part of their identity. And now, for a long time, I kind of held it against them. It's fine to have your identity. It's fine to have your system. It's fine to have your program. I get it. And I wanted to support that. I probably shouldn't have been so snarky about it at the time. But at the same time, I think, just because it wasn't their habit, they were very skeptical of somebody doing a different gathering time. Like I said, sometimes we use it as a way to see who are the wheat and the tares. The wheat are here on Sunday morning, firmly planted, and the tares are wandering about to the wind. They're enjoying sunshine. But there is a good reason. There are right reasons. I think, and I'm going to give away the secret, I had a whole list of all the reasons why we gather, and then I remembered, that's the sermon I'm going to give here in a minute. So I don't want to give it all away in the introduction. But let's just give away the end. It's because we need each other. We need each other to do a lot of things, to be a lot of who we're supposed to be, and I think to be who Christ has called us to be. Being together is a huge part of that. What that looks like, the format of that, is up for praxis. We can do it a bunch of different ways. But the reality is, gathering together as people who want to follow Jesus is an important part of us growing, an important part of us doing our mission, an important part of us knowing who Christ is. So it's good for us to gather. It's to stay true to our mission and our calling. When we first met several years ago, I think in 2021, we were talking about this idea of being a simple church. A simple church in a complex time, and I still hold to that. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those principles we talked about way back then. And I try and talk about this at least once a year to remind us of why we do what we do and why we do it the way we do it. Not that it's the only way, not that it's even the best way, but it's the way that works. And that those of us who are here is why we're here. So we're going to be in Acts 2. Acts 2 gives us a description of what happens after the tomb. So it's describing what the church and how it worked and how it was based and the message and the direction of Jesus, how they tried to live that out and how they were living. So there's the Great Commission given, hey, go and make disciples. Peter has given his sermon. There's 3,000 extras now. And they're trying to figure out how to live. And so they get the commission. The Holy Spirit is given to them. Now they have this new empowering that is able to be in all of those who are believers, all of those who are followers now have the empowering of the Holy Spirit within them to guide them both individually and collectively. They're not sure how that works yet, but they're beginning to experience that power and that ability. And so they launch the church. And we get a little glimpse of what it looked like. Just a little window of how they organized, how they made that work. And to be honest, that's kind of the way I want to be. That's the kind of church I want to be that looks like that. So what do we see? Number one, followers of Jesus gather to share. Followers of Jesus gather to share. Sharing because they had need. There were needs within that group. There were this weird, diverse group who were persecuted and marginalized, and they needed community. And they needed to be together to learn how to share. Not only did they share their stuff, but they shared all of themselves. They shared themselves with these people in all areas of life. Acts 2, we're going to look at verse 42 and then 44 through 46. All of the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. First of all, I'm sorry, every now and then I have to stop in the middle of the verse. I love the devoted. They were committed to this. This is what all the followers, all the believers did. They were devoted. Their important thing in their life, something that they made sure they didn't miss out on, something that was part of the core of what they were doing. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, man, and I love this, and to sharing in meals. Woo. Right? Including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. I got to admit, and again, another little aside, sometimes when I'm planning a service, I kind of want to do this, and sometimes I forget. Sometimes I forget an important part, the one I need to apologize for. I forget to pray sometimes. I'll do a whole service, and I won't pray. Man, I think sometimes we've made the apostles' teaching, I don't think of myself as an apostle, but teaching is the center part. But man, we need to pray more. So and sharing meals. We need to absolutely begin to share more meals. Let's put that in there too. So that's what they did. They devoted themselves to the teaching, to fellowship, to sharing meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. And all the believers met together in one place and they shared everything they had. They gathered together and put it in a pile. And they sold their property and possessions and shared the money to those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, and they met in homes for the Lord's Supper. And they shared their meals begrudgingly and out of habit. Oh, no. They shared it with great joy and generosity. Man, the essence of this is that they worked in common. They gathered together so they could be in common. They could share in common. To do this, to share genuinely, to gather, requires unity of purpose. Hey, we're all going to do this together. We're going to make sure that when we get together, we're going to make sure people have what they need. It requires unity of dignity, the idea that we want everybody to be loved because God loves them. Rich, poor, Jew, Gentile, man, woman. It requires knowing the needs. They had to gather. One of the fascinating parts of this, they had to gather. One of the reasons to gather is to have some intimacy, this joyous feast, these meals, and this hanging out together, and every day they're worshiping. That's also how you know if somebody has a need. One of the problems that I think I have is I want to give, I want to share what I think you should need. Right? Or maybe what I'm comfortable sharing. Whether you need it or not, I want to share it. Now, I'm going to show a video here. I'm going to ask you to be kind to me. But this, I think, is the quintessential, perfect example of doing something incredibly kind, but not being focused on what the person actually needs. And I'll give it a little background. It's an Australian... Okay, already we're off the rails. It's an Australian sports TV show. And they're doing this feature. They had been doing a feature on a rugby player who had lost his arm. And they were interviewing. This guy had done great work in his community. And then the reporter came back, and this is what happened.
What do you think?
Turn it up.
Probably the right thing was to get a cup of coffee for Jack, and you put it in a saucer.
Okay. That might be in poor taste. If it is, I'll edit that out of the video. It doesn't count. But I love this point, though, that this guy, they're doing this feature on this guy who's doing great work in his community, and they want to honor him. And what a nice thing for the reporter. He's going to go get him a cup of coffee and even put it nice on a saucer and takes it out to him. And the other guy, the guy with one arm, is so kind that he doesn't make a big deal out of it. And they're like, he walked around for a half hour carrying that coffee without being able to drink it. Now it's funny, at least to me it was funny, because both parties were deeply kind. And how often, because we're not listening to what people actually need, we're not paying attention, we don't know them well enough, we just want to smother them with what makes us feel good, or what we're comfortable giving, or what we think they should have. In order to really share with people who have need, we have to gather and know those people. We have to be willing to listen to what would actually be helpful, rather than what we think they should have, based on our experience, based on our agenda, based on what we think we have to offer. We need to share in a way that is tangible and useful. So I love that the new church members, this new gathering, this new group, they shared with each other to ensure that everyone had what they needed. I love it. They were devoted to God, and they witnessed, they shared with people, and they were teaching and showing the teachings and example of Jesus. And how did they do it? Some basic human stuff. They ate meals together. We have always talked about that food, when we have our small groups, food's always a part of it. There's something about eating together that breaks down barriers. Right? You sit across from somebody, and you have something to eat, and you have something to have a little coffee, and it turns this pressure situation into just an intimate, normal part of humanity that we all do. I love that they did that. They have intimate and basic times together over meals. They also shared, stuff, money. I like this idea that they're like, hey, people are poor. And those who had enough helped the people who didn't have enough. And I want to say, I always feel a little weird talking about this in this group. I know you are an incredibly generous group. I know most, if not all of you, do this all the time. But it's a good reminder. One, that we should be able to help each other. We need to look out and for those who have needs and provide as we can, using our wealth and our resources as an opportunity to break down barriers rather than to create barriers, right? We need to find ways to help connect to people. And I know you guys do that. I want to encourage you to continue. They helped all sorts of people. They helped people who are in need, not just with money then, but they also, by getting together, by gathering, by spending days together, by eating together, they were not only helping physical needs, but they were helping people who are in poverty of spirit, people who are in poverty of heart, when they're lonely, when they're afraid, when they were just together. One of the things we've found in our church as we've discussed our community that we found is there's an increasing loneliness in our society. There are people who are in poverty of relationship. And us providing time, us sharing ourselves, us sharing our time, us sharing a cup of coffee and a meal can help break that down. We share everything. So they spent time worshiping, remembering Jesus, praising God, and then they shared. I'll throw in one more little piece here that I like, is that they went to each other's homes. They opened their homes. They invited people into their space. And I love that idea that they were hospitable. They invited, and again, sometimes some of us are able to do that in our actual physical space. Some of us are not able to, but we need to invite people into our figurative space. Let's invite them into our life, into our sphere, into our family. So there was this great generosity, this crazy generosity with their stuff, with their money. They knew what people needed, and they found ways to provide it in their community. Not our culture today where we share out of excess, out of comfort, whatever resources that we feel we can spare all too often. At least myself, I struggle with that. That they shared to make sure they shared more out of seeing the need of somebody else rather than what they felt comfortable keeping. I thought about this week. I don't know what, talked about the apostles' teachings. I'm really curious what that was. Because at the time, obviously, they had the scriptures, the old writings, and the prophets. But I think the apostles, what did the apostles have to share about was the life, the teachings, and the example of Jesus. And I think because of the way the people responded, he must have been talking about caring for the poor and the captive, and the stranger, and the marginalized. That must have been what they talked about because they saw that from Jesus. And that's what they were teaching. So what do? We need to, here's the big thing, and it's a little, boy, this is the ultimate preaching to the choir moment. Because you're here. You made a choice this morning to gather. But we need to reach out and be willing to help others. For us to really know and care for each other and care for each other's needs, we have to be around each other. Sometimes quality time is quantity time. And we just need to make space. We need to gather enough to know what people need. We need to hold our stuff lightly. Stewardship has come in the 20th century to mean growing our wealth. There are all sorts of stewardship ministries that are all about how to invest, how Christians should invest their money. And crazily enough, most of those have some way that you can invest in their plan. What a crazy concept. Stewardship actually is holding lightly. Holding lightly. Is it bad to invest? Not at all. But the idea is that it's used to break down barriers rather than to create barriers. Stewardship means using our resources of ourselves and our stuff and our money for others, the way Jesus would, investing in lives. And then we need to be devoted to gathering gathering with people both in smaller groups and I think in this church. Gathering as Restore Church. And this is not a church growth concept that we need to make Restore Church huge, but we need to continue to gather and encourage others, not guilt them, not put pressure, but let people know we miss them and that it's good for them. We're better when we're all here. So to encourage people to gather. Because we can do more together than we can do separate. We have different levels of resources. We have different levels of both financial and stuff and emotional and time and effort that we have to offer, varying resources and personality that we can share with others. So first they gathered to share. Then secondly, followers of Jesus gathered to seek God. There's something that happens when we get together, that we are able to worship and seek God better together. Acts 2:46 said they worshiped together at the temple each day. And then in verse 43, a deep sense of awe came over them all. And the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. I like that they prioritized worshiping God together. They gathered to do that. I think, again, we spend a lot of time talking about quiet time and personal devotions. And those are good. Those are good disciplines to have. They're important for us to spend personal time with God. But also there's something that happens when we worship together. There's something that happens when we gather, whether it's all of us on a Sunday or a few of us on a Thursday or getting coffee together on a Monday. And I think there is, because people are lonely, it's easy just to get in that rut. And we need to maybe begin to step out, to not only to spend time together, but find time together to be together with the purpose of connecting with God. So getting together to pray, getting together to worship together, to connect with God. The awe of God was of God. When people saw that, they talked about there was a sense of awe, not just because of the miracles the apostles were doing, but because they realized that was from God. When they were gathering, this stuff was happening, they were in awe of what God was doing through his people. And they worshipped. And in verse 47, it talks about that they praised God. There were these pieces that every time they got together, not only did they enjoy time together, not only did they look for ways to care for each other, but they also were encouraged because they saw what God was doing in each other's lives. They saw what God was doing, and that there's something about being in a crowd that's cheering for the same thing. Right? I'm a Boise State fan. Boise State football fan. It is great to watch Boise State football on TV. But the best is in the stadium, with everyone else cheering for the same thing. When we're together, the vibe is a little different, I get, on Sunday morning than it is in a Seahawks game, or even a Mariners game. Right? But there's something that happens when I'm worshiping, when Jim is leading us and we're singing, and I'm singing off-key and weirdly paced, But we're all doing that together, that there is an encouragement and an ability to praise God, an ability to worship, not just through music, but through conversation and through prayer and through discussion and through, hopefully, even while we're learning together. That is just different than when I'm sitting on my chair at home by myself. There are moments I am in awe of God. I got to admit, I haven't seen a lot of miracles that like someone walking. I have seen healings. I have seen people genuinely healed. But you know what? The miracle that I get to see where I am in awe of God is when there's somebody who was an angry person or somebody who was an addict or somebody who couldn't get out of grief. And we spend time and we gather and we worship together, and God changes the life, that there is no amount of therapy, no amount of conversation, no amount of books and self-help could change when we see a person go from darkness to light, from death to life. When people change because of God, that makes me in awe. That helps me worship God. Does my belief, and this is a question, this is a challenge for us today, does my belief, does my following of Jesus, does my understanding, does our gathering together still change us? Are we still in awe of God, or we just go through the motions? Do we show up, enjoy a donut hole and coffee, chat, and go home? My hope is that we commit, we devote ourselves to continuing to change. You know what a miracle? I'm going to throw a new one in. I've talked about this a few times. When somebody our age